When I built this house, it wasn't to prove a point. I didn't care about resale value, manicured lawns, or whether Karen and her HOA kingdom 200 feet away approve of my concrete walls or solar filtration. I built it because I've seen what angry weather can do. 30 years flying commercial jets over the Gulf taught me firsthand what nature looks like when it throws a tantrum, and I wasn't about to let retirement in with my roof scattered across the bayou. The land was cheap, suspiciously cheap, but that's southern Louisiana for you. Swampy, storm-beaten, yet stubbornly beautiful. I bought 1.88 acres of wild overgrowth just beyond Grandwater Shores, their pastel little boxes fading into pine and cypress. The county line cut through those woods like a snake, and I made damn sure every deed and zoning record proved my dirt was on the right side of it. The house went up low, tight, half-buried, with walls thick enough to stop a truck. Steel shutters, hurricane glass, and a foundation sunk deeper than patience. The shed stocked with tools and fuel, the tank filtered by UV, and the generator, she purred smoother than bourbon. Independent. Quiet. Built to last. Just like me. They hated it. They knocked early on, polite smiles and glossy pamphlets. Join the community, they said, as if cul-de-sac sidewalks and decorative mailboxes made people care about one another. I declined, polite at first, then legal when they tried to annex my land. That little stunt cost them dearly in court. Round one went to me. But they weren't done. A year later, they redrew their boundary map, conveniently wrapping my land inside. Cute trick, too bad I had the notarized originals. The judge laughed them out of the room. Their final attempt was a community action day, tables and flyers in hand, marching into my woods. They didn't get far. A no trespassing sign, and me in camo holding a chainsaw ended that parade in seconds. Soon after, the court barred Grandwater Shores from ever bothering me again. I framed that ruling and hung it in the shed, right under the bourbon shelf. For a while, peace held. I added garden beds, cleared some trees, and enjoyed the quiet. Some days I didn't see a soul. That suited me fine. The HOA folks still drove their SUVs to the fence line, gawking at the bunker house, confused why anyone would build like this. Why bury walls in dirt? Why bolt down steel shutters? But you can't explain storms to people who've only ever lived under blue skies. Then came Imagigen, a soft name for a monster that tore roofs off like napkins. Phones lit up with flood maps and evacuation orders. I checked the generator, sealed the doors, brought in the cats, and waited. You don't fight storms like that. You hold on and pray your math was right. When it hit, it sounded like God had started over. Trees snapped, rain went sideways, debris clawed across the roof. For a moment, it felt like cockpit turbulence over open water, that same helplessness. I poured a coffee, sat with my book, and let the walls take the beating. That's why I built them. What I didn't know was the storm wouldn't just wreck houses and streets. It would rip open reputations, redraw boundaries, and leave people desperate for someone to blame. And somehow, I was about to be their perfect target. I didn't open the storm door until the second morning. The wind had died hours before, but I wasn't eager to see the aftermath. I'd spent the night with the generator humming, the storm howling, and figured daylight could wait. When I finally stepped out, the silence hit harder than the noise. The world looked shredded. Trees stripped raw. Roofs caved in. Fences ground into splinters. Debris scattered like bones. I poured a coffee, sat with my book, and let the walls take the punishment. Shingles, siding, twisted lawn chairs, wreckage everywhere. A kayak sat in the middle of the gravel drive, no water in sight. The smell was rot, seawater, and insulation. I scanned the tree line, half expecting the HOA welcome committee to crawl out of the wreckage like corporate zombies, but the woods stood broken and quiet. The boundary between me and them shredded down to bark and splinters. I walked toward Grandwater Shores, against my better judgment. I didn't want to see it, but something told me I should. The closer I got, the worse it was. 18 houses had taken direct hits. 2 were gone entirely, just slabs and twisted pipes where homes used to stand. Silence pooled in the streets, along with scattered furniture. A kiddie pool dangled from a power line like a war trophy. I found survivors, some dazed, some bleeding, all of them looking like they'd seen something worse than weather. I helped dig a woman out from under her porch steps. She didn't speak, just clutched my arm like I was gravity itself. I carried an elderly man half a mile to a church where a few folks had opened up shelter. I gave up my backup generator to a guy with 2 toddlers and a diabetic wife. Not because I like the HOA or their people, but because nobody deserves to suffer like that. I didn't see Karen. Not then. On the 3rd day after the storm, the mail came. Yeah, the damn mail. That's how you know civilization's trying to reboot. A FEMA truck passed me on the road, and right behind it came the old county jeep with a postal worker tossing damp envelopes into tilted mailboxes like nothing had happened. I found an envelope taped to my gate, laminated like a diploma. Legal letterhead, a seal. At first I thought it was another passive-aggressive flyer about my lawn disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. I almost laughed until I saw the amount, 10,184,233. I read it again. The number didn't change. The letter claimed I was liable for communal restoration of Grandwater Shores, its infrastructure, landscaping, and housing recovery, because my home had remained unscathed during the event, and I had refused to participate in collective storm-proofing measures as mandated by local community guidance. Then came the real kicker. Your anomalous immunity from environmental damage raises valid concerns of intentional exposure deflection or non-participatory safeguarding behavior, which may be considered legally actionable under both civil and moral obligation frameworks. They were accusing me, in official language, of somehow steering a hurricane away from my house and into theirs. It was so far beyond absurd I sat down in the dirt and stared at it. My house hadn't even lost a window. That was my crime. I brought the letter inside, scanned it, and sent it to Raymond, my attorney. He called back laughing so hard I thought he might stroke out. "That's not a lawsuit," he wheezed. "That's an acid trip on stationery." Still, I could hear the warning in his voice. "But Miles, if they're serious, this is going to get ugly." That night I saw the first post. Someone from Grandwater Shores had uploaded a drone shot, panorama of the neighborhood in ruins with one tiny island of safety dead center, my place. Underneath, a caption in bold white text, coincidence. Likes climbing. Shares spreading. At first I thought it would be a one-off, the kind of trashy HOA drama that fizzles out in a group chat. I gave it a day, then another. But it started appearing everywhere. Local Facebook groups, Reddit threads, even a write-up in the Bayou Breeze, which I didn't even know still had a print edition. How did one house survive untouched? Could design alone explain it? Or was something deliberate at play? That was the tone. Not outright accusations, just enough speculation to light a fire under a bored and traumatized community. Someone posted side-by-side satellite images before and after the storm with my house circled in red like I was ground zero for some FEMA conspiracy. Another thread showed a photo of me carrying a wounded man from the rubble with a caption. Odd that he was ready to help so fast, almost like he knew. Within a week, I went from lucky survivor to suspicious anomaly. The HOA hadn't filed anything official yet, but they didn't have to. The internet was doing their dirty work. Then came the article. The St. Bernard Parish Observer ran a piece titled, "The Imagined Immunity, When One House Stands While Others Fall." There was a blurry photo of me, probably from a neighbor's ring cam, standing on my porch. The story tiptoed around legal language, but the subtext was as subtle as a sledgehammer. A retired pilot builds an unregistered independent structure mere feet from HOA property lines. His home survives untouched while Grandwater Shores suffers catastrophic loss. Local leaders demand answers. Unregistered. That part made me snort coffee. My permits were more airtight than their roofs. But the worst wasn't the media. It was the way the people changed. The same folks I'd helped, the woman with a crushed deck, the guy with a diabetic wife, now wouldn't make eye contact when I passed. Teenagers on bikes stopped outside my fence and threw a rock at the mailbox. I found a hand-rolled note under my windshield wiper at the gas station. "Your silence equals your guilt." I tried ignoring it. That lasted maybe 48 hours. Then came the court summons, an official complaint filed by the Grandwater Shores Homeowners Association citing refusal to engage in collective mitigation programs as outlined by local HOA Resolution 17C. Possible use of unlicensed weather-resistant technology contrary to regional atmospheric guidelines. Willful avoidance of community disaster protocols resulting in disproportionate impact distribution. And my personal favorite, moral failure to align with collective burden-sharing ethics. Apparently not getting destroyed was now unethical. I took the summons straight to Raymond, who barely blinked. "Well, I hope you weren't planning to retire peacefully," he said. Then he leaned in. "This isn't about money, Miles. They're setting you up to take the fall." They lost control of everything. The homes, the narrative, the people. Now they're trying to claw it back through you. I didn't reply. I just looked at the copy of the Observer on his desk, my own face staring back in black and white. That night, I poured myself a tall glass of whiskey and stood by the window, watching shadows ripple across my quiet yard. Then I opened my laptop and started digging. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. Raymond always looked like a man who could gut a bank with a stapler and get away with it. He had the kind of permanent smirk that made judges nervous and prosecutors twitchy. I called him 2 days after the summons hit, and he didn't even say hello. Just come by. Bring coffee. We're going to war. His office looked like someone had shaken a legal library and dumped it onto every surface. In the middle was a whiteboard where he'd already started sketching flowcharts, acronyms, and arrows like we were mapping a terrorist cell. They think this is just another bluff. Same playbook. Legal bullying, media noise, manufactured outrage. But this time they overplayed their hand, he said, jabbing at a bullet point labeled HOA overreach/0 jurisdiction. I handed him the scanned letter, and he grinned. Perfect. We hit back with defamation, violation of prior injunction, and civil harassment. Then we dig. We got to work. Raymond filed a formal cease and desist and prepped a countersuit. Meanwhile, I started digging through local property records, FEMA reports, and anything public I could find about Grandwater Shores. The deeper I went, the more things smelled like mildew in a locked attic. For starters, the HOA had filed proof of insurance with the parish after the storm. Documents that looked polished, official, even stamped, but they were fake. I cross-referenced policy numbers with the state insurance database and came up empty. Raymond brought in a contact from FEMA who confirmed it. Grandwater Shores had no valid disaster coverage. What they did have was a stack of fraudulent insurance certificates handed out to homeowners over the past 3 years, all printed with logos of real companies but traced back to an offshore broker that didn't legally exist. So all those families had been paying monthly for protection that never existed, and they didn't know. They were blaming me while their own HOA had pocketed the money and left them naked to the storm. That was the first break. The second came in the form of a manila folder left at my gate, sealed with blue painter's tape. No signature. Inside was a USB drive and a typed message. If you want the truth, look inside. I can't keep doing this. I scanned the drive for viruses, then opened it. What I found made my stomach tighten. Internal HOA emails, financial spreadsheets, meeting transcripts marked confidential. There were records of transfers from the HOA Emergency Reserve Fund to individual personal accounts, some disguised as consulting fees, others routed through crypto exchanges just months before Imagigen hit. But the worst was the strategic memo labeled Phase 3 Consolidation Plan. In cold corporate language, it described a program to absorb adjacent properties through legislative pressure, zoning adjustments, and negative incentive deployment. Translation: force out the holdouts. People like me. My parcel was circled on a digital map labeled High Priority Resistance Zone. I stared at that for a long time. The next day, I got a knock on the door. Not law enforcement, not press, just a tired man in his late 50s in a windbreaker 2 sizes too big and a look that said he'd had enough of pretending. Name's Tom Brady, he said as I opened the door. Not that one. I was treasurer on the HOA board until last week. He handed me a second flash drive. I can't be seen here. I already know I'm screwed. But after the storm, after seeing what they let happen, I couldn't live with it. Why me? I asked. He hesitated. Because you were the target. You weren't just outside the HOA. You were the symbol of what they couldn't control. He left before I could ask more. That night, Raymond and I turned my shed into a war room. Laptops glowing, bourbon sweating in glasses, every flat surface buried under printouts. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a grudge. It was a machine. Fraud, kickbacks, intimidation, an entire structure built to control, and my existence outside their fence line had exposed the lie. I glanced at the laminated injunction hanging on the wall, the one that said they couldn't touch me. Then at the flash drive full of proof that they already had. We weren't just going to defend ourselves anymore. We were going to take them apart. Courtrooms always smell the same: dust, disinfectant, and the nervous sweat of people who know they're lying. We slipped in through the side door. Raymond looked like he just finished a press conference. I put on my best button-down, which still made me look like a survivalist at somebody else's wedding. Grandwater Shores rolled in heavy, 3 lawyers in matching suits and haircuts, all white smiles and brittle confidence. Karen wasn't there yet, but you could feel her coming like humidity before a storm. This wasn't the final trial, just the prelim, but the room was packed. HOA members filled the benches like a revival meeting. Some were angry, some frightened, a few already guilty. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a gavel scarred from hard use, opened with a weary sigh. This hearing would decide if Grandwater Shores even had standing to sue me and whether my counterclaims for harassment and defamation could go forward. Facts only. No speeches. Raymond stood like it was Broadway opening night. First, he sketched the timeline, the storm, the HOA's letter demanding $10 million, their bizarre claim that I'd somehow deflected the wind. The room chuckled. Even the judge's eyebrow went up. Then he began dropping folders like grenades. Folder 1, certified FEMA engineering reports showing my house was built to exceed hurricane codes, fully permitted, twice inspected. Folder 2, the 3-year-old injunction barring the HOA from touching my property. Folder 3, financial statements, $2.4 million siphoned from the HOA's reserve fund through crypto investments, consulting, and phantom insurance accounts. Audible gasps. Someone in the back whispered, "What the hell?" Raymond raised a USB stick. Internal emails. Spreadsheets. A strategy memo labeled Phase 3 Consolidation Plan, detailing how the HOA intended to pressure and smear adjacent landowners into submission. My parcel circled as a priority removal target. That's when Karen arrived. She dressed for pity, beige, no makeup, hair slightly mussed, like she'd been too devastated to care. She took a seat behind a lawyer's and tried to look small. It didn't work. Raymond queued up the recording. Karen's voice unmistakable on a private call with another board member. "I don't care if the whole coast washes away as long as my house sells first. Let the wind do the heavy lifting. And Walner, don't worry. We'll bury him in paperwork. Let the press eat him alive." Dead silence. A ripple of murmurs. The judge's gavel cracked once. Order. The HOA lawyers scrambled, shouting about illegal recordings. Raymond presented the chain of custody, an anonymous tip, verified, admissible under Louisiana's one-party consent law. The judge nodded. Aloud. Then she delivered her ruling slowly like hammer blows. The HOA had no legal jurisdiction over my land, had violated an active injunction, and had brought a case on frivolous, malicious grounds. Preliminary evidence of financial misconduct and defamation existed. My counterclaim was accepted. Damages to be set later. The matter of the HOA's finances was being referred to the district attorney. I didn't react in the room. Not yet. I saw Karen's face, not rage, not panic, just that flicker when someone realizes the story they've been writing just went up in flames. We left the building into a wall of cameras and microphones. Raymond handled it with curt legal statements. I kept walking. Back home, I opened the good bourbon and sat on the porch watching the sun drop behind what was left of the trees. It was quiet again, but not the peace I'd built for. It was the hush after something big breaks, and the pieces haven't finished hitting the floor. For weeks later, the official letter arrived in a plain envelope with a county seal, Grandwater Shores Homeowners Association, dissolved. No parade, no champagne, just a quiet line of text declaring the monster dead under the weight of its own rot. The next morning, county trucks rolled up to the HOA's community center, boxy white vans with government plates, evidence bags ready. They hauled out filing cabinets, hard drives, even whole desktops wrapped in anti-static sleeves. I stood at the edge of my fence, coffee in hand, watching like a spectator at an execution. Karen wasn't there. But that afternoon, her mugshot hit the local news. She'd been arrested in Denver on suspicion of wire fraud, conspiracy, and misappropriation of funds. The anchor said she'd sold her house in advance, knowing the storm was coming, transferring the deed to her sister under another name. Cute. The broadcast ended with a quote from the sheriff. They were investigating possible coordinated financial abuse across multiple HOA-managed subdivisions. Turns out Grandwater Shores wasn't Karen's only playground. When the fraud went public, the fallout was nuclear. 18 families, the same ones who once glared at me across a courtroom, filed civil suits against her personally. When they realized their insurance policies were fake and their dues had vanished into thin air, they turned on her like wolves on raw meat. I heard one guy even try to break into her old house with a crowbar before the sheriff dragged him away. I didn't post, didn't gloat, didn't say a word. But I did make one change. Had a custom metal sign bolted to my gate. Stop. Private property. Not a member of any HOA. Trespassers will be photographed, reported, and publicly mocked. The last line was half a joke. Sort of. I added 2 new motion-activated cameras anyway. I drive farther now for gas out past the parish line. Some faces still recognize me. Most look away. That's fine. I never wanted to be their mascot. I just wanted to be left alone, and now I am. Raymond called the day the settlement hit my account. $2 million and change. Well earned, he said. I pushed most of it into a cold wallet and buried the key under the pecan tree. Not for secrecy, just for peace of mind. The rest went into a reinforced greenhouse and a rebuilt solar array. If the world's ending, might as well grow tomatoes. Every now and then the phone rings, a TV producer, a podcast invite. I ignore them all. I'm not here to be a story. I already lived one. The only visitor I've let through since the dust settled was Tom Brady, the treasurer, not the quarterback. He showed up one evening looking lighter, less haunted. Handed me a small wooden box, the original HOA charter, ink faded, signatures naive. You're the only one who beat them without becoming them, he said. I just nodded. Later, I burned it in the wood stove and poured a double. That night I sat on the porch as the cicadas buzzed and bats cut across the sky. The air smelled of honeysuckle and ozone clean. I hadn't asked for a war, but I'd built for one. She was younger than I expected, the reporter. Maybe 30, tan blazer, smart eyes, voice like she'd practiced it in the mirror. She knocked politely, didn't barge in. That already earned points. I know you've turned down every request, she said, but I'm not here for scandal. I'm here for the truth. I looked at her, then at the small recorder in her hand. She caught my glance. Off the record. You have my word. Normally, I'd send someone like her packing. But maybe it was the way she said truth, like it still meant something. Or maybe it was just a quiet morning, and I had nothing better to do than sip coffee and indulge a stranger. We sat on the back porch under the hum of the new solar array. The wind had shifted from coastal to inland, dry warm. Birds were back. Even the lizards had made peace with the gravel. She asked about the storm. I gave her the basics. She asked about the HOA. I told her they'd built their own mess. I simply refused to join it. She didn't push, just listened. Then came the question they all ask in the end. How did your house survive? I looked at her for a moment, not suspiciously, just thoughtfully. You really want to know? She nodded. I stood and pointed to the foundation slab sunk 4 feet into the earth, to the steel-braced walls, the storm shutters still spotless after the worst hurricane in 3 decades, the backup batteries, the anchored water system. I didn't build to impress neighbors, I said. I built to outlive their mistakes. She scribbled a note, then looked up. But you never joined them. Not even when they asked nicely. They never asked nicely, I said. She smirked. So you think it was just preparation? Not luck. Not divine protection. The breeze kicked up, scattering pine needles across the deck. I leaned on the railing. I didn't summon the storm, I said. I just knew it was coming. She was quiet, then nodded once, professional. That's going in the article. I didn't mind. As she walked back to her rental car and passed under my custom sign, I watched her go. That was the last interview I ever gave, and maybe the first one worth having.